And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get 2 gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 338. Today's episode is all about the deep impact of childhood experiences on adult love.
I am going to protect myself by creating a narrative in my head to prove the belief system that I inherently have embedded in my somatic shape, right? That I'm not special. And so I'm going to protect myself by looking for all the clues that prove that right. And so the way to kind of come out that is, we call it disconfirming beliefs. So like experiences, and that's when we have experiences, and you might have experiences with your husband where he actually does put you first, or you raise your hand and he responds in the right way, or you start to show that little girl, actually, no, like that's a part of you when you're scared that goes there. And look at all these other things that he's doing to show you that you are in fact first and to show you how important you are. So you have to recreate positive experiences to counteract the belief system that's there.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to earn some positive karma today, please leave a 5-star review. You have no idea how much these mean to me. Seriously, fuels me for the whole week. Have you ever found yourself wondering why certain feelings just won't leave you alone? Like you're carrying this invisible backpack filled with emotions that somehow seem too familiar, no matter where you go or who you're with. You might have asked yourself, why do these parts of my past just cling so stubbornly, shaping not just moments, but your very life story? See, the thing is, we're all product of our experiences, but sometimes it's not the ones that you can outright remember that have the tightest grip. It's those subtle, often overlooked emotional imprints from our youngest years that silently steer the ship of our behavior, relationships, and even our self-worth. I used to say that I don't think my parents' divorce had an impact on me. It happened so early that it was all I really knew. But in the last 5 years or so, I have connected so many of my anxious attachment patterns to not having a dominant father figure. And I say dominant because I did have a stepdad who was awesome, but it was always that ask your mother situation. I definitely didn't feel like I had that father-daughter bond. Maybe the lack of secure attachment with my parents led to a decade of relationships where I thought my love needed to be earned. I felt pressured to fit into this box of non-clingy cool girl who loved burgers and sports, was always ready for sex, and would even check out hot girls with you. Well, whatever the exact reason, I constantly felt that I wasn't enough to keep people around, believing that I had to do more and be more. What we often don't realize is how those childhood experiences shape our worldviews, no matter how trivial they might seem to our adult selves. But to the 3, 5, or 7-year-old you, those experiences are searing into your neural pathways, solidifying into your beliefs about yourself and the world. It's like we're all carrying around these weights, never acknowledging them, never setting them down. But what's at stake isn't just happiness, it's the richness of life. It's the ability to connect authentically and the chance to step into who we are meant to be. But here's the kicker. These same shadows, as painful as they can be sometimes, also have the power to lead to our most profound understanding of ourselves. So today we're diving into just how much of our adult selves are blueprints scribbled into our young minds. And our guest is Jessica Baum. She is the founder of the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach, and she's helped thousands of clients with her unique approach to healing, the self-full method. So 3 key things we will learn are the unspoken emotional impacts we make in relationships, how to manage anxious attachments, and the powerful steps to sit with your past wounds, understand their impact, and start to heal. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Can we talk about how overwhelming wellness advice has become? Cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes, morning routines. It just feels like there's advice for everything these days. But how do you know what actually works for you? I've been down that rabbit hole, trying every new trend, buying every new course, following every guru, and it is exhausting. And honestly, a lot of it just added more noise to my life. With all the information overload about mental health and wellness, it can be a real struggle to know what's true and what actions to take. That's where talking to actual professionals comes in. Therapy helps you cut through all that noise and figure out what you actually need, not what some influencer is selling, but what works for your specific situation. It can teach you how to set boundaries, trust your own judgment, and be the best version of yourself. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They have a rating of 4.9 from 1.7 million reviews, and you can join a session at the click of a button and switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. Instead of drowning in generic advice, you get personalized recommendations from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Can we talk about back to school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
E-commerce business owners know a successful business keeps customers happy. That's why smart retailers use ShipStation. Turn shoppers into loyal customers with cheaper, faster, and better shipping. Manage all your orders and returns in one place and save up to 90% on rates from all the global carriers. Go to shipstation.com/program to sign up for your free trial. No credit card required, and you can cancel anytime. That's shipstation.com/program.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
And now let's welcome Jessica Baum to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what inspired you to focus this part of your life on anxious attachment?
Oh God, there's a long story behind that, and it's just years of doing my own work and working with family systems and couples. I'm an imago therapist, which is like a special trained couples counselor, and I started to see dynamics play out in my private practice, and of course my personal journey is in this book. So I just wanted to get everybody this information. It's like, this is why we're suffering. This is what's going on in your body. I'm not the only person going through this as a human. And as a professional, I'm helping people work through it. And I just felt like that information needed to be out there.
So tell us about your experience with it, because I know a lot of times people are like, well, they're a therapist. They've got it all together.
Oh God, no. I mean, I am a psychotherapist who has struggled with quote unquote codependency, which is really what anxious attachment, really codependency is just a word that's made up that kind of describes certain traits and behaviors of people that have a lot of anxiety and people pleasing and whatnot. And I struggled a lot when I was younger, and I'm constantly working on myself. And I think I'm very vulnerable, and I'm probably more vulnerable than the average clinician or professional that writes a book, because I think not only do I want to be the expert who has studied this, but I also want you to know that I'm a human that has also suffered through this as well. And it just helps you feel like less alone in it, and we're in it together. And people really appreciate that we-ness of my book.
Yeah, I feel like that's why this podcast has been successful, is because I've gone through the shit to come out and wash myself off. So I also appreciate just the differentiation, because I learned about codependency back when I was in a codependent relationship. But it took me a really long time to pick up that book, because that word for some reason just didn't resonate with what I was going through. I was like, I don't feel dependent. I feel like I'm saving somebody. Like, what is going on? And then when I learned about attachment theory, the word choices, I was like, this is me. And so I didn't even really realize that codependency and anxious attachment were so similar. So tell us, what is attachment theory?
Yeah, so attachment theory was discovered in the 1950s, and it is really based on science, and it's based on how our nervous system and how we develop in terms of our earliest attachments. And so with our primary caregivers, we don't come out fully developed as human babies, and our nervous system and our organs, we're sensing into the world, and we're learning how to trust the interactions with our primary caregivers. And through the interactions and how our primary caregivers see us and attend and co-regulate and are there for us, we develop circuitry inside of us that helps us anticipate how connection is going to be. And because connection is a biological imperative, we learn a lot of adaptive strategies and develop embedded patterns in order to stay in connection. And so there's 4 different categories, because we like categories, and I can go through them if you want me to. You're shaking your head. So there's secure. So a lot of the population is secure. So they have an inherent trust in the world, and their parent was more or less attuning to their needs and co-regulating, and their nervous system, which was calm, was able to lend itself to the baby, grew up feeling a little bit more calmer. And it's not that they don't have problems in relationships, it's that they don't get as dysregulated in relationships. They have an easier time with closeness, and they have an easier time with abandonment. So those extremes don't seem to dysregulate them. And when they do get dysregulated, they come back to their baseline. We call that homeostasis faster. And then there's 3 insecure types. There's anxious, avoidant, and insecure. And all 3 of them struggle in different ways. And I write a lot about anxious because that's what I identify with, but they all struggle with closeness and feeling safe in the world. So anxious people tend to lose themselves and attune to their caregivers. So we're really empathic and we can sense the room, and we self-abandon in order to feel what's going on with a parent. So we're always the first to know, things, and we can read things, and we're almost like we can check the temperature outside of us before we check the temperature inside of us. And there's the other hallmark of anxious is inconsistency. So we're expecting the shoe to drop. So we can get into connection and then we're like, are we going to stay in connection? Or our core beliefs could be around, I'm going to be left, or I'm unworthy, that kind of thing. And then you move to avoidant, and a true avoidant didn't get their emotional world seen into. And so they struggle with emotion, and they shut down. They can shut down, and they can be more independent, and they can be more quote unquote self-sufficient, which is an adaptive strategy actually that takes you out of connection. And then there's fearful, which is, it's like when you can't go towards your primary caregiver, but you also need them. So you're stuck in this very scary place of being trapped and not having a safe place to go. And this can happen if you were abused, or if your parent was really scary to you and you needed them, but you wanted to move towards them because we need them, but you can't really move towards them because you're also terrified of them. And if any of these kind of things happen, and sometimes it's very out of conscious awareness, but these patterns happen a lot when we're small. And what people don't realize is that we take those patterns and we recreate them in our romantic life or in our closest relationships. And that's like the mind-blowing part, is like the way in which you're responding, your gut, your heart, you're having this sensational experience with your romantic partner or someone who's really important to you. There's a deeper root to that. And it goes back down to like how you developed in early years and what is safe for you and what you do in order to stay in connection. So all the insecure types struggle a little, whether it's too close. Like an avoidant person struggles with a fear of intimacy, and so they don't want to get too close. That's their conscious struggle. Their unconscious is abandonment. And an anxious person struggles with a fear of abandonment that's conscious, and an unconscious fear of intimacy. So those two tend to attract each other, which I talk a lot about in the book. So knowing where you stand kind of helps you start to understand like where your work might be and with whom and how it might show up differently in different relationships.
I remember when I was younger, not really noticing or understanding that some of my childhood experiences could have created these emotional patterns. And it's because overall, I had a pretty good childhood. My parents were divorced. I got a stepdad pretty early. That was great. And so in the story that I crafted later on in life, it was that my first boyfriend kept cheating on me. And so then that's what created the trauma. It wasn't until I got older that I started to realize that my story doesn't need to be one of obvious or abuse or anything like that. Sometimes it's the little things that can affect how we internalize things. And I remember learning how the statistics of people who grow up in divorce and just being like, well, no, mine, it wasn't a traumatic experience, so I must be fine. But then it was later on where it was little things, like my parents were really religious. And I remember being like for me, it was me and my mom until I was like 5. And then we moved in with my stepdad, who's awesome, still is. But there's like the little things of, in her religion, the marriage came first. And even though that might be true, hearing that as a 7-year-old who all of a sudden this was a new guy in our lives and that comes first before our relationship now, it's funny, I just uncovered this like a year ago and it brings me to tears now. There's like that wound that's still there. And so it was after that I really felt like I was on my own and I needed to like earn that love. Like I never had a partner that was just with me. I never had a dad that was just for me. Like all these little beliefs that I didn't even see until later on. And so it's funny because now that it comes up, it's like, oh, another layer of healing I didn't know was there, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that like you have a common response. Like we all go through our childhood, and as a protector, we think, oh, it's not that bad. Look at all the people who have it worse, right? Well, and I think that like you have a common response. Like we all go through our childhood, and as a protector, we think, oh, it's not that bad. Look at all the people who have it worse, right? But then when you really start to embody your experience, really embody it, you start to realize, oh my God, this was my world, and these little things impacted me so much. And they live inside of me. And now I need to get in touch with like how much they lived inside of me and how much they impacted me. And I think that's the shift that happens when you sit down with a therapist or you slow down and you start to realize like, yeah, like comparing yourself to others, we get it. Like someone's always had it worse than you. Someone's probably been beat and all these things. But you don't know that when you're 6 or when you're 7. All you know is that your world is that big. And if your parent does something like say, you're not my primary focus, or you're not as special as this, it's going to deeply kind of resonate and live inside of you. And you're going to create you're going to internalize that, and it's going to become a wound. And it's important to really, kind of look at like, well, Melissa's life back then, this is a big deal. And little Melissa still lives in there. And she's now sharing with you what it actually felt like, because it wasn't safe for her then, and now we can start to be with like, wow, that was pretty devastating in her world, as it should be in any young person's world when their parent turns to them and says like, hey, this is more important than you.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I was just interviewing Sarah Kubrick, who had sort of the opposite story. She grew up in war, literally fleeing from war, but that's all she knew. And there was periods of time where she thought she'd never see her family again. And again, that was all she knew. And so it wasn't until later on that she realized truly how traumatic her experience is. And so regardless, though, it doesn't help us when we invalidate our own experiences, because those are the experiences that are there to teach us, depending on your beliefs. I believe that's what my soul came here to learn. And so you talk about how relationships are mirrors. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that relationships, the deeper we bond and the deeper we love, the chances of a deeper wound showing up in our relationship will come up. And so whatever is implicit, or let's say subconsciously living in our body and a core wound, there's a good chance when we bond deeply with someone, it could get projected into the relationship. And so our work comes up when we are in relationships. The closer we get to someone, the more that we're going to reenact or get touched something deeper within us. And I think there's an awakening process that happens. I know through the Imago work and the couples work I do, when I can help a couple or an individual say, yes, your partner is doing this behavior, but look at what they're waking up inside of you. And this is familiar. And let's go back to the origin of this. Because when we can go back and heal and understand that it's not just the behavior that's happening here and now, but what you're going through in these sensations and how you're struggling is telling us that there's history here. And when we can be with the history, then the behavior, like the intensity goes down and we start to understand it. And there's many layers to that. And I believe that all of our relationships are mirrors. And the deeper the relationship, the chances more, the deeper parts of us are going to be touched and awakened.
When I look at my experience, we'll just use that one wound that came up, even though there's many other ones. It seems to show up in two different ways. In the first series of relationships I had, I chose people who just didn't put me first at all. Like they were cheating on me. I was always insecure. In the second part, something I didn't really put 2 and 2 together until this conversation, actually. But now I have an amazing husband. I have a relationship I feel very secure in. But there was a period of time in the beginning, he's very close with his sister. And there was a couple times where like she was in town and then she came first, and I could feel that wound being activated. Like, okay. And I knew, like, I would sit there and be like, no, I love her and I don't feel jealous of this. And I want him to have a very close relationship. What is this feeling? Why do I feel unrest, dis-ease, And so now looking back, that could have totally been it, where it's just like, no, that was that little wound screaming out. And so it shows up in two very different ways. How is that? Why is that? Is it that it starts, usually it starts in the most extreme way to kind of teach you what to pick, and then you get to another layer? Or what do you see there?
Oh yeah, well, those are like two different questions, but I will say like your wound around, I'm not special and the person who is supposed to be my number one is going to leave or choose someone over me started very early and lives inside your body as a memory. And we have something called neuroception. So we're always scanning for threat, right? And so that was very threatening for you in a lot of ways. So your body is going to sense the possibility of that being recreated again. And it's going to do whatever it can, and it's going to be recreated in your world because it lives inside of you. It's not because of who you pick as well, right? And so your husband is great and he has a wonderful relationship with his sister and it lives inside of you. So the opportunity for it to peak up was there. What is important is the communication, the awareness, understanding this is old and it's happening now. And how do I get reassurance from my husband and work through it, work through the repair? That's a re-experiencing that could be healing. What happens, and I think this answers like the second part of your question, is that we have a somatic understanding of what relationship feels like and what our expectations are. And often that can be subconscious or live in our body or wounds, and we can gravitate towards what's familiar. And what is familiar isn't necessarily what is good for us. It's just like recreating what we know. And as human beings, we will go towards what we know versus something that feels foreign. So if it's healthy love and we've never really experienced it, but we've experienced this other type of intensity or whatever, we will gravitate towards that. Like I know that I grew up with a dad who had some substance abuse issues. So I've always had a tendency to move towards men who have struggled with substances. And the second they're using substances, there's my inner child is like, well, there you are. You're not with me. You're gone. You're on another planet. And it's like, I've had to work through that, right? Because as an adult, if another adult uses substances, it's kind of like, okay, they're just getting really drunk, which isn't cool, but my system's on fire because my system remembers what it was like to be really small and your dad is really high, right? So that's where you start to develop like these other layers of understanding, oh my God, or my neuroception is picking up on things that were really scary. And I think that we pick people that are familiar, hopefully to get more conscious and heal. That's like the way I like to look at it. It's like if you're in a relationship and you're listening to this podcast right now and it's a little bit turbulent and there's a lot going on and you're experiencing a lot of pain, there's an opportunity for you to heal in that relationship, either with that person, but really with whatever is coming up in your body, with a person that can help you kind of sort through like what is really being activated inside you and where is the original wound.
So I'm hearing that often we gravitate towards what's familiar, but eventually we want to move to a place where we have the awareness of that, but recognizing, having some grace for yourself that still does live in your body. It might even come up in the healthier relationships. And so how do we know though, if we're in a relationship that we can heal within versus one that we might find our best healing outside of?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. So in Imago, therapy is couples counseling. So if you're listening and your partner is willing to do therapy and you find a good therapist, either Imago or EFT, I would suggest, there's always conscious healing done together in those kind of venues, right? With a skilled person. But sometimes we're in a relationship where our partner doesn't want to heal. And there's two things you can do. Like a lot of people aren't ready to leave. And the work can still be done with you and someone else's nervous system who can actually show up and be present for what that relationship is bringing up inside of you. And so when you start to heal, what leaving or not, the allure and working through it becomes clearer and clearer as to what the right path is for you. But automatically you can choose to do the work with, and we can talk about what that actually means to do the work with, like what you need to do that. But you can do that at any point with anyone who's capable of doing the work with you in any relationship that you're in. And if the relationship is really toxic or the other person really, really can't do the work with you, eventually what happens is that person usually ends up leaving because it's too painful to stay in those types of relationships.
Yeah, I am the type of person that always found it difficult to heal within a relationship. But I also noticed a different pattern where I always found it easier to just run. So I am still finding that balance. I mean, now my life is so different. I'm in this stable family. I have children. There's nothing to run from anymore. But I used to fully move cities, move friendship circles. And ultimately, as much as I felt that that was healing while it was happening, it just created this form of isolation. And also, I think I didn't trust myself to stay or trust other people to stay. And so it developed a different kind of self belief. I was developing negative beliefs just in kind of falling back on that pattern every single time. And so there is definitely some benefits in, working through. As somebody who never had siblings or anything like that, I was always the lone wolf. And so that's something I'm still figuring out as well. But you also talk about how everyone that we have an intimate bond with, whether it's a partner or family, we enter an emotional pact with them. Tell us about that.
So I talk about the unspoken pact. So we meet someone and our adult selves meet them, but we have little boys and girls inside of us. So sometimes it's like, I'm going to make you never feel alone and I'm going to make you feel really special. And it's these like unspoken promises that are like pretty much impossible to keep. They're like what later we're like, you make me feel so alone because that aloneness lives inside of you, right? Or you make me feel so not special because that's really their core wound. And so the pact gets made of the fantasy, kind of like, you're going to take care of this for me. And then usually explodes later when you realize that that person can't save you from your loneliness or can't save you from, not feeling special. And those feelings are going to come up even in this relationship. So I talk about like kind of how that happens. It's disillusion, kind of being disillusioned at some point. And like what you were saying, running, I talk about the nervous system. I talk about the automatic nervous system freeze, but particularly you're talking about flight, which is still a fear response and an adaptive strategy for someone who's more avoidant. If I'm really, really uncomfortable, I'm just going to change the situation because then I can get out of the feelings that are making me uncomfortable. And that's your adaptive strategy to survive. And it's worked for you. But unfortunately, it stops you from doing the work and possibly working through what's coming up for you if you were to stay in those connections. And people with that adaptive strategy often say that they're pretty lonely.
Yeah, this relationship is 10 years strong. So hopefully I'm doing some of that work, but I can still see it comes out in friendships. We moved to a mountain town back in 2020 and I've gone through such highs and lows. There's such a great community here, but I frankly don't have a ton of time to really invest. So then I'll see a birthday party online and I'm like, oh, I wasn't invited to that. And it's all those wounds. And I'm like, but you're also not making the effort. It just comes up. It comes up. It's always going to come up until I'm still figuring that one out.
For sure. We all are. We're all still doing the work all the time, and just trying to get more conscious of it.
So what activating or deactivating strategies can we use to help us work through these wounds?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we'd ever want to activate ourselves through the runes. I mean, and I don't even know that it's about deactivating. I think it's about bringing awareness to the wound and bringing the wound to someone who can help hold it. So we keep wanting to meet the wound. We don't want to avoid it. We don't want to medicate it. We want to meet it and like be in the presence of someone who helps us can bring it to its origin and re-experience it in a new way and keep doing that so that we can tolerate the wound differently and we can hold it differently and we can start to make sense of it differently.
Sometimes when I discover a new wound, a new layer of work, it's like all of a sudden my mind is flooded with all of my past experiences that back up that story. And in a way that's kind of good. You can see the thread so that you can move from there. But in another way, I used to find it very easy to kind of sink back into that. Like, oh, I've never felt like I was number one. Oh, this person that I know does love me, he said this back on our second date, and he said this before. And all of a sudden, the problem feels bigger than before you have uncovered it. How do you coach people or advise people to work through that? Because I know it's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, it's like a protector. It's like, I really don't want to get hurt. I've been hurt a lot. So I'm going to start to case build and look for ways in which this is true. So I'm going to prove this belief system true. I'm not really special to this guy. Remember what he said in 1999? Remember that statement that he said? And I know the other day he didn't, he picked up Sally before me, or whatever the case is. I am going to protect myself by creating a narrative in my head to prove the belief system that I inherently have embedded in my somatic shape, right? That I'm not special. And so I'm going to protect myself by looking for all the clues that prove that right. And so the way to kind of come out that is, we call it disconfirming beliefs. So like experiences, and that's when we have experiences, and you might have experiences with your husband where he actually does put you first, or you raise your hand and he responds in the right way, or you start to show that little girl, actually, no, like, that's a part of you when you're scared that goes there. And look at all these other things that he's doing to show you that you are in fact first, and to show you how important you are. So you have to recreate positive experiences to counteract the belief system that's there. And that can be a very scary thing, because you have to challenge your original belief system.
That is one of the keys I use for anything I'm trying to move toward. And it's funny how sometimes you can have a blind spot, like, oh, it won't work here, but it works everywhere else. This is my number one method. And so I'm all about creating that evidence. But it's so funny. Every single time I do this, it's like I'll go down to write. I find it easier to write. Sometimes I use a voice recorder if I'm on a walk or something like that, if I feel like I'm avoiding doing the work. And so I'll go to write it down, and it's like this huge layer of resistance comes up, like, nope, I don't want to be proven wrong. I don't want to be proven wrong. And I have to like breathe through it and then write the first thing. And then before I know it, then everything comes flooding. And it feels so much better. But it's like my mind is trying to convince me that staying in that story feels better than healing from it for some reason.
Well, it's trying to protect you. The irony is trying to protect you from your biggest wound, which is, I'm not special. So if it stays in that story, it can stay on defense. If you come out of that story, you get more vulnerable, and you could potentially get hurt more. So that's really a protector. Thank her when she's in there and she's working hard to prove a point. She's been protecting you for a really long time. And some of the work is sitting with the original wound of feeling not special, when your mom literally was like, this other relationship that's new is more important than you. And I'm not throwing, your mom was doing the best she could, and parents usually are, but like, being however old you were, and probably this might have even started before them, but like, being with those parts of you that were just so wounded or hurt in those moments, and actually giving it the gravity that it needed over and over and over again, until it's like, yeah, that was part of my story, and she lives inside of me, and that's totally okay. And I can see her differently.
It's difficult for a lot of people when they're uncovering these wounds, especially when they have good parents, or actually both. Whether you had good or bad parents, it's difficult bringing some of these things up. I'm wondering, do you ever advise people to have conversations with a caregiver that may have been a part of the creation of these wounds, whether they intended to or not?
It's a tricky question. It depends on if the caregiver has the capacity to repair. If the caregiver has too much shame or feels like they're being judged themselves, they just defend themselves, and it doesn't really get them anywhere. I think the more healing that you do, the more you realize that your mom and dad really have little boys and girls inside of them. And you start to look at this is when we start to look at intergenerational healing. And we start to see that your mom is a product of her parents, and what she was taught, and she's also surviving. And we start to look at all these layers of, she's impacted you, but her intention was never bad. And so that's not always the case, but part of the process is that. So sometimes I do family work and family systems work, but you don't need your mom or your dad to be in the room to do the healing. And when you do heal yourself, you start to see them differently. You start to see your grandparents differently. You start to understand how things have gotten passed down, nervous systems, belief systems, all of that. And you start to have so much more compassion. And that doesn't come right away. I mean, I was mad at my dad for years. And my dad's parents are Holocaust survivors, and my dad wasn't really emotionally available. And I used to get really upset. And I'm sure I picked a whole lot of men, because of that. And I won't even get into my mom. But when I started to really peel back the layers and see what he got and where his parents, just survived, and how much terror probably lives on that side. And, I started to do my own work, and I started to see like what he could give, which was not a lot emotionally. And I started to see him differently. And you start to shift, and you kind of grow up and you start to see your parents as little boys and girls too. And there's just a lot of shifting that happens, but like that comes after you have appropriate anger and you have appropriate like grief around what you didn't get. So there's so many layers to all of this. So it's never about blaming our parents. I mean, our parents, most of the time, they're just doing the best they can with what they got. They just didn't get what they needed either. So how can a parent give you what you needed if they didn't get it to begin with?
And I imagine so much of the healing for me will come at that phase of when I have children. Like there's already been a lot of understanding. My oldest is almost 3 now. And there's already a lot of understanding in different areas. Like my mom was breaking molds. For a long time, I had the story like, why do I have to be the first one in the family to break all the generational trauma? Why am I the first one doing the work? But when I look back, first of all, my dad had it really bad. His story was worse than most people I've ever heard. And my mom, great parents, but they didn't show that love. And so I remember even being younger, my mom telling me, like, my parents didn't say I love you a lot. So this is important to me. And so I knew that from such a young age that I was trying to break that pattern with my grandma. And I was constantly telling her I loved her and trying to get her to like open up a little bit more. And so it's funny though, because it's like when we get into our own stuff, all of a sudden I'm only focused on my wounds and woe is me. But if I step back and it's like, okay, she got me to this point. Where would I have started if she didn't take those few steps forward? And so just being thankful that I've at least been placed unaware or a situation where my nervous system can kind of rise above what it was before instead of just getting through survival mode. And so I imagine, especially as I'm growing, my parents and I have very different like spiritual beliefs. But even then, I started realizing, oh, wait, you took me out of class for that lesson because you didn't agree with it. And I thought she was a whack job back then. And now I'm like, I'm not sending my kids to public school. And so it's like, oh, how the tables have turned. Are my kids going to grow up and be like, my mom was a whack job too?
I think there's a lot of healing that comes from being in that role and starting to see how hard that role is and how imperfect we are and all of those things. Yeah, there's something called conscious parenting too, which kind of is this idea of like I said, like our partners are our mirrors, but our kids are also our mirrors in terms of like what's really coming up with us. So we start to really see the whole world differently when we get more aware in that way. So that's pretty cool.
Another thing you teach about is the belly brain. How does it function in helping us to get out of that survival mode and move to the more rest and digest state?
Yeah, I talk a lot about sympathetic activation, and like it's not necessarily the belly brain, but if you've been scared and you're listening, you can feel it in your gut. There's a memory center in your gut that's attached to fear. And so when we sense like any sense of threat, one of the centers in our body that is going to get activated is our gut. So like our gut instinct, whether that fear is real, perceived, or trauma, like coming up from us, our gut has a ton of memory and information that shoots up to our brain and works way faster than our brain, right? To tell us something's really wrong here. And we really need to listen to that. And our heart also has a memory center in it too. So our embodied brain is really our skull brain all the way down to all of this. And all of this is an information highway where 80% of what we're perceiving in our environment, in our room right now, comes through our body and up through our brain. And no one ever thinks of it that way. So it's just getting into those spaces where memory is stored and embedded trauma gets stored in our fascia, in our gut, and in our heart. So when we become more embodied and we slow down and we start to do more of our work, we start to kind of unpack some of these experiences that actually live in our body, which is pretty cool. That's where they get stored until we're really ready to handle them.
So you mentioned how you also dealt with anxious attachment. How does it still come up for you? And like, walk us through what you would do if you could feel those feelings rising.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to my editor today about a project that we're doing, and she was supposed to get back to me a couple days ago, and I could feel her anxiety, and like my somatic anticipation is like, oh my God, she's not going to want to work with me, or and so then I have to trust the process and realize, oh, you're always assuming that the ball is going to drop. It might not drop, and if it does, it's maybe something better or different is out there for you, but like you don't have to assume the worst all the time. Or a friend didn't invite me to something, maybe it's about me, or like always coming up with these like turning it on myself kind of way. I'm not good enough, or it's just going to be hard, like listening to those stories of myself and realizing like, well, maybe it won't be that hard, and kind of challenging that when it starts to live in my body, because I can sense when things are going awry, and then I have to try to say, and I can manage anything going awry right now. And if I can't, I can co-regulate and call someone who can help hold the space for whatever fear it is that I'm dealing with, or whether it's real or imagined.
And so, what does it look like when somebody, say, I wanted to be the one to hold the space for someone else? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I think a lot of our culture is like, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to tell her what's wrong. I'm going to tell her how to handle it. And it's like holding space. I call it anchor, is someone who's non-judgmental, supportive, and just with you. Validating, okay, I know you're having a really hard time. I know it's really scary to wait, or I know this is really hard for you in the moment. Can I just be with this part of you? And so that's the re-experiencing that we do kind of in therapy too, without fixing it. So we want to find people who can just be there and not have to fix. People who really want to fix or get really uncomfortable, it's because they have a hard time with the sensations that's coming up with them. So they're avoiding it by fixing, but they're not even consciously aware that they're doing that.
That was my like go-to thing. I'm like, I don't understand this relationship problem. Like, it's very clear. You just need to move on. And that got me into some trouble in my 20s. People don't really like to hear that, even if you feel like you have the clear path.
Right. Well, that's what made sense for you.
Say we are realizing some of our tendencies. It's not quite healed. A lot of my life has been around, figuring out who I really am and creating a life based on that, so that I'm not just following other people's versions of success, falling into old patterns, whatever it is. But where's the line of saying, okay, I'm anxious avoidant, so I'm not going to get into sales? Or maybe stepping over that, maybe finding healing in that is actually exactly what I need for my next level. How do you decide when a wound is something to ease off from, step into? I mean, it's all for healing, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I kind of understand. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was like saying in line with your authentic self. And I think that in order to stay in connection and survive, we disconnect from what we really need and want. And that's very, very normal. So kind of getting in touch with your truth and helping someone help you vocalize what you need and want. So if you really want to be an actress, or you really want to be whatever it is, that you're connecting with what your truth is. And if you're not connected to that, it's because you disconnected in order to survive. And that's also very normal. And we lose authenticity when we're scared, because we can do a lot of things to survive, which is disconnecting from ourselves. So that's one thing. And then, the other thing you were saying is, how do you know when to push yourself kind of out of your comfort zone? I've definitely done that in my life. And I'm like, is this masochistic of me that I'm picking a medium? Like, I'm not a great writer, and I'm like trying to author books, and I'm not a great public speaker, and that's what I'm going to try to do next. And it's kind of like listening to yourself, like, do you want to try it, and what part of you wants to try it? And is it like something that you have to prove to yourself or your mother or the world, or is it something that you inherently just want to try and do to challenge yourself. And so asking yourself those deeper questions kind of within, I think that's important.
Yeah, I like to look at it. Is this limiting me from a bigger vision that I have? Am I creating a different life because I'm afraid to go to this one? Or it all takes those questions, because you can create a story around anything. And so that stillness and being like, does this feel right? Or maybe not for now, but maybe I'll take this little step. So it's all just the choices and getting in touch with spending time enough in silence to ask ourselves the questions and letting the answers arise instead of those patterns.
Or, like, I'm going to try to publicly speak soon, trying it. If you don't like it, it's okay. You don't have to stay with it. You can try something else. It's not like you're a failure because you try something and I've had to tell a couple of people, you've been trying to write this book and it's just not coming out of you. Maybe you don't have to finish it. Maybe there's something else that is calling you. So don't be scared to try, I guess. And also don't be scared to say, I tried it and it's just not really for me.
I interviewed Annie Duke back in the day, and she talked about the power of quitting. Quitting gets a bad rep sometimes, but really depends what place it's coming from. And Bridget Hilton was on a recent interview too, and she's all about experiences. And she had this big goal to run a marathon, and then she did it, and she's like, "Yeah, that sucked. I don't ever want to do that again."
I don't blame her. That's not on the top of my list. So that's definitely things that people idealize, and they're like, "I want to do that," and then you do it, and you're like, not really for me, right?
I always thought I wanted to climb Mount Everest, and I'm kind of glad I came to the realization before I took those first steps, because I was like, actually, why do I think I want to do this? It sounds terrible. I don't think I'm going to like anything about it.
Yeah. So I think really honing in on the why. Like, a lot of things I want to do, I'm not good at, but the why is so strong that it pushes me through.
Yes. And so I love leaving listeners with just one thing to focus on this week, whether it's a thought experiment or an action item, to really ground in some of the stuff that we've learned. If you were going to leave them with a little growth assignment, what would that be?
I would say, if you're struggling in your relationships or want to find your core wound, to go back and start to look at the patterns in your life and start to see at the root, is there a belief system to any of these patterns? And if so, where does that live in my body? And so you can start to see, oh my God, this might be attached to something deeper and it might live in my body. And no matter how many relationships I'm in, I keep coming back to this one feeling that lives inside of me, and starting to recognize that that's probably got an earlier origin. And so that's where I would leave them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this and for getting personal with me. I know it really helps when people hear real experiences and real applications. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, Anxiously Attached, where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram page. It's Jessica Baum, LMHC. Anxiously Attached, Becoming More Secure in Life and Love is literally everywhere. I mean, it's like in 11 countries, but you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at your local bookstore, thank God. I have a coaching business called BeSelfful.com. And then I have a private practice here in Palm Beach called the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach. But literally, if you put Jessica Baum in Google, probably all of it will show up.
All the links in this episode will be at mindlove.com/338. Your challenge for this week is to start to notice any of the patterns you've had in relationships. If you really want to heal and get rid of these patterns, we first have to be aware of what they are. So awareness is always the first step. Now, often, if we have been in denial for a while, we might think, well, if I knew what these patterns were, I would have broken them by now. But first of all, give yourself more credit than you are used to. We get so accustomed to Googling everything that comes to our mind instead of asking ourselves, do I already have this information? And I'm going to give you a little hint. We already have the information when it has to do with ourselves. It's there. We have just gotten really good at ignoring or justifying or whatever our defense mechanism is. So if you want to get really granular, start to write down some of the patterns from each of your relationships and see if any commonalities come up. Otherwise, if you already have an instinct of what these are, like people-pleasing, losing yourself in relationships, not valuing yourself, not setting very high standards, what are your patterns? Now, Spend a few moments in silence and just ask yourself, what is the root of this? See what arises. See what memories are the first to come to mind. That's actually a great question to find these answers. When was the first time I remember feeling that way? When was the first time I remember feeling like I had to earn my love? When was the first time I remember feeling unworthy? When was the first time I remember feeling undeserving? What memories come up? These just might be the roots of these issues. And once you identify the root, it's so much easier to begin to clear the pathway for healing. So let me know what you come up with, or if you need any help with this exercise, reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. I want to give a shout out to my Soul Strength clients. You know who you are. We just launched the most powerful group. I am so stoked about each and every one of them. We are going on a life-changing journey. So if you missed the boat on this one and you want to get on the wait list, reach out to me. I'll put you on the wait list for the next session. All of my sponsors are at mindlove.com/sponsors. I have all the amazing discount codes and links. So go to mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.